Our next presentation will be made by Sarah Miller. She is the Regional Director of the Northeast and East Central Centers of the Florida Public Archaeology Network, and she works at Flagler College in St. Augustine. Thank you for joining us, Sarah.
I'm delighted to be here. So if you can't hear me, just interrupt, or I should be showing the banner slide, but let me know if I'm not. I'm gonna set my timer real quick because I have a lot of info to cover. First, I want to just talk about a couple acronyms and what we do at Florida Public Archaeology Network. I want to talk to you about a couple other programs that are important for the basis of our site stewardship program. Then I want to give you some updates on some of the stats. And then I've got a potpourri of things I hope you steal as I'm writing down a lot of ideas to steal from others. Borrow, graciously borrow, collaborate. So I'm very thankful to be here today, and thanks to everyone who organized. First, I wanted to give a land acknowledgement that we work in Florida, ancestral land of the Appalachee, Muskogee Creek, Miccosukee tribe, Seminole tribe, also Timucuan, and also our area is in the Gullah Geechee corridor. So we work with descendants of the Gullah Geechee and those who were enslaved, but we are literally in the Gullah Geechee National Heritage Area corridor. So we work with them and are grateful whether we are uninvited or invited guests. So what's in a name? I've got all these acronyms, and knowing some may not be familiar, I wanted to go through those first as a way to structure the ABCs. One, FPAN is the Florida Public Archaeology Network. We were started 15 years ago, and I am director of the Northeast East Central region. In a nutshell, we exist to help to protect the state's buried past through education and outreach with these goals. And site stewardship fits right in here, where we're doing education outreach, assisting local governments, and assisting our state's Division of Historical Resources. This is the map and a couple just general notes on programs for FPAN of our annual numbers. And I am speaking today, but no, I'm speaking on behalf of all these people in this photo that are other FPAN staff and also our great volunteers. So I think on and off, we have people come and go, but around 1,000 volunteers who have been working with HMS since it started. And Chris, who will be speaking tomorrow on the steward panel. So you're gonna get to meet Chris, and she is our numero uno, #1 monitor, and we're so grateful to have her. You can't have her, other states think, okay, she'll probably travel across state lines for you, but really excited to share what might be some of her stats too. So that's what FPAN is, and it's important before we talk about this, the site monitoring program to talk about CRIPT. CRIPT is our Cemetery Resource Protection Training Workshop. I came here 15 years ago from Kentucky, where I was heavily involved with a lot of moving of historic burial grounds and disinterment and reinterment, and I thought, you know, it'd be great if we could keep them like where they are. And a lot of that is just because the evidence of them on the landscape disappears. So we did our first workshop in Palatka, maybe 2012, and it kind of caught on. We have now done just under 90 workshops. We did our first virtual one the other day. We have all these graduates of the program in different counties, different cities. And as others were mentioning the importance of conferences, we thought once we have the literacy level of our cemetery stewards up and going, what special topics do we want to dive into? And that's how we met Chris. So she is actually even a recent taphophile, but excited to have her. I think some of the reasons CRIPT caught on so well, it has a very set structure of presentations in the morning, of managing historic cemeteries, going over some of the burial laws that might apply depending what land you're on, looking at the Florida Master Site File, and we used to have a GPR component, but who can afford a GPR? So we moved it to be our monitoring program is now part of the CRIPT suite. And then in the afternoon, when it's not during a pandemic, we go out and work with stewards to clean headstones, to record them, look at macro issues at cemetery and micro, and again, do some training of monitoring the site in the field. those conferences that happen each year are really great. One year we were in the theater and we have prizes and awards we hand out. But the other thing I want to say is it got used to working with a bajillion partners, because every crypt we do, we partner with the community, we partner with the cemetery, we partner with the church or the local government. So we are already pretty used to working in that environment. If you're interested in more about the crypt program, we have an open access article for you can look at, and I will post, I've saved like 10 links to put into the chat. So I forgot to do that ahead of time, but I'll load those up just as soon as I hit my last slide, which won't be for like 10 minutes. But transitioning to talking about HMS Florida, and I don't want to hear it from you ship people. Yes, there were 4 HMS Floridas. None of them are floating around today, but we like the didactic of having this coastal nod to coastal heritage. And I actually have our origin napkin. Maybe you can't see me, but we could be today talking about float, or what was the other one I had? It was float and surge were the other acronym choices. So HMS Florida, that's what we went with. And HMS came about first because of our cemetery work. We had a city planner that worked up here in this northeast notch and said, you know, Sarah, I'm working on a cemetery management plan for the city-owned cemetery, and I'm looking at the sea level rise and we're going to be impacted. What should we put into our management plan? And I was kind of dumbfounded because I knew it was an issue, but I hadn't really applied it to our work directly before, or how we fit that into the FPAN model, and realizing development was a major threat. But now climate change and sea level rise are certainly one of the major threats we need to turn our attention to. So this was a very rough bathtub model put together for the governor's office. And it was the first time I saw these numbers of what might be impacted by a 1 meter or a 2 meter rise. And then these numbers, you know, these are huge, this is a lot. But wait a second, you know, 4,000 sites, 3,000 sites, we can maybe actually get out and get eyes on those depending on time. And it's not just that sea level rise is coming, it's like the hardscaping or the armor that we put into shorelines will trap water in. So they do need an eye to what's happening. And this is at Fountain Youth Park, about 2 miles from my house, and was a few years ago. It wasn't even a storm, it was just a high tide and rain. So we were looking around for what resources were available and found some for the national park system. And in that time, we also had storms like, this is a minor hurricane, Hermine, that hit, and this is Crystal River Mound over on the west side, the Gulf side. You can see this erosion line where the mound was flooded up to. So we got out and took some pictures there. This is Jeff Moats over in our West Central office. We also started to look at the cemeteries, which are open access. These are not even from the site file. This is from a GIS layer of municipal cemeteries. So we used that to put the sea level rise viewer on it. So we had an idea as we were looking at cemeteries, what's going to be impacted by sea level rise at different rates, but also the storm surge. Keep in mind, my office is about here. When we had Hurricane Matthew, I already had this map, but neglected to check it. So when security told me to park our vehicles over here, I did so because they said it would be more secure. And then boom, we had a Category 2, all this flooded, and insurance companies were called. The cars have been replaced, but good lesson to me and to other homeowners, vehicle owners. Check your maps that you are already using professionally and for these purposes. I don't know if many of you inland are familiar with NOAA's Sea Level Rise Viewer, but it's a really great tool. Any coastal region could use it and look at. It's got different sliding markers. One thing we were finding when we were going out to look at sites initially was not only, you know, do they get flooded, the access roads can go out depending on the foot rise. But in one case, and I'll show you it later, we were out and seeing standing water that had been there for more than a year in the what would be the 2-foot scenario. So that's a good thing to monitor and check too, because that wasn't current view. That was already flooded to the 2-foot scenario level. The NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer also has these great images that will show you some cultural features. This is our oldest masonry structure in the United States, the Castillo de San Marcos in Florida. And the rise scenario there. And this is a state-owned site, Fort Clinch, which is up kind of near where that cemetery was that our planner talked to us about. So there was some good resources and planning resources on the national park level, but we became a little bummed out looking out for other managed lands, particularly private, municipal, county. There just hadn't been a lot of planning resources then. This is from the Canaveral National Register site, and a lot of these launch pads were just built for a single day for a single purpose. They weren't meant to stick around for 100 years. So they even stenciled in abandoned in place, which I also say is going to be my either my first tattoo or my headstone marker. But leave that there, which is the case for most of the sites that you saw on the dots on the map. And now I deploy the kittens because it's a big bummer when you're facing looting or you're facing human threats. And now we've got this other one that is so large. But how do we stay positive? How do we get our endorphins going? And thought, well, let's do something like Crypt, see how we can make it uniform, and pitch the idea to this Heritage Monitoring Scouts. This is our first discussion ever about HMS Florida. It took place back in 2006. We are in the Bureau of Archaeological Research in Tallahassee, and we had a lot of people present for that presentation. We had someone from the site file, someone from the academic realm, somebody from the avocational group in the state. So it wasn't a large group, but we had a lot of partners represented and kind of asked permission to go forward with this baby, with this idea, and have been working with them ever since. So monitoring, this group gets it, but it can be really hard to describe. Why you not just go to a site? Why do you go back to a site? This is during Hurricane Matthew. We had an outlet that opened up in a single day, and we had a phone call that said, shoe boxes of sherds are coming out of this area right here. By the time we got there, there was a 40-foot pile of sand already there. So who had been there last? Who saw what? Who's been there since? And when I do this talk in the public, they're like, man, Sarah, I was just walking that beach the day before, or I walked it after. I saw that pile. I could have looked for you. And I collect these monitoring forms from bathrooms all over the world. So you can send me yours after. This is at Skara arguably Scotland's most significant cultural site. Yeah, I put up a picture of their toilet checklist, not of the actual site, but it shows, and this one's pretty minor. It just wants to know who was there when, where were they. Most of these checklists get pretty, you know, what needs to be restocked, what's damaged, were things looking okay? Because it's important to know who's responsible, who was there last, even if it looked okay, who could you ask questions if a change happened? So if we are keeping this much attention on our bathrooms, it makes sense that we should be looking this closely at our National Register sites or our cultural resource sites. We're also aware because of Project Archaeology. It's been around about 30 years. I'm on leadership team for that and retired, and now the state coordinator. And we read a great book on citizen activism. And it's important in the engagement structure, public engagement, that you have these different levels and honor that volunteers need to be able to fluidly go up and down. And we were very thoughtful about how to do this with HMS, how to have people observing, following once they join in, how they can sign up forms, and when appropriate, either leading or co-leading groups as we go out. So this is a bit of a mess, but as we started to think of what the site would look like and getting our beta forms out there, what would be the process that we would put information out, but get volunteers to give information back in. And these pages exist today, so I'll put that in the links too if people want to check that out. If you want to know what 1,300 cemeteries look like in a single map, this is it. This is the cemeteries for Florida from that municipal layer map. And there are about 1,300 that are on the site file. There are 4,000 in Find a Grave. So we already know we have a big data gap to go after, and we have a cemetery dash trying to get stewards out to cemeteries before and after hurricanes, because it's so much easier to go before a hurricane than after, and keep eyes on them so we can help with county city declarations. This is the beta form, and it's just a little bit easier to share. Now we have an Arches system, but it's on a couple different screens. But this is in general the information we were collecting. And note on the beta form, there's no location information. You could hack away, find this form, but you wouldn't know where the site was, maybe the site number, although most people didn't know the site number of where they were on the beta form. But you get an idea of the kind of threats and conditions we were looking at, what kind of artifacts were visible, and we were able to pilot this form for a couple years before putting it into our more official database. We had pilot opportunities, so the National Estuary Research Reserve was a very early partner. They have a lot of their own volunteers that are out working around. We pitched to them this idea of doing 4 training sessions to get the same group out experienced, out monitoring, doing mapping, doing identification. So if they know they're on a 18th century site, what could look weird? What could be something that might need to get updated? The other reason we really like working with the NER is it's got the Shell Bluff landing site. And like, Sarah Miller, stop talking about Shell Bluff landing all the time, but I really can't. It's such a great site. Over here behind Courtney's head is a waterway. We used to be able to bike out and have discussions at this well. It's a 200-year-old well on a 6,000-year-old archaic midden, and chat around with people. And this is what it looked like now. Like in a very short time, I would have thought we had 25 to 50 years left with this resource, but I think it's going down in the next year or two because it's just eroding that quickly out. So what we've been able to capture, this was before a training event that we didn't even mean it to be the before picture. This was after Matthew, before, after Matthew, Irma, and now just a nor'easter that wasn't even a hurricane. So that's why we feel it's important to get out there and track. So we can't just say the site went away, but how it did. We present at the State of the Reserve each year. Emily Jane put this graphic together. So this is just one site of those across Florida, and it has been monitored fairly heavily, but we can get a lot of good stats about volunteer times, updates, people engaged, and share that with the reserve. I spend a lot of time with this map. I think other site steward directors would, because this shows our participation, or used to be by county, how we could say HMS was active across the state. Well, sometimes it's blue where scouts live, sometimes it's orange where the sites are, sometimes it's gray where we've done a training, or sometimes it's yellow where there's a partnership. So it was active in different places in different ways. And it's important because if you have a lot going on here, this was all done by, by one steward who then moved. So the next year, that line went away. So that's important to think about sustainability and how you keep people engaged and making sure your full line of monitoring doesn't disappear in a year. We're really excited this year. We have a special category grant from the Division of Historical Resources. So our numbers have shifted a little bit because we didn't keep to the same timeline as the grant has gone. So this is just some preliminary data from the interim report. I don't have a link to that, but if you're interested, I'll put my email and you can email me and see. But this is currently in the last year, how many forms have been submitted, how many are twice, which for us is really important because we're not just interested in a scout getting out there. We want to see what that changes over time. And then these scout signups, which was a little hard during COVID, right? So that's our interim report, begins with a COVID statement, and just to give some acknowledgement to the many, many other people besides me who are working on this project. In the instructions, and I do have a link to that, it was really good just to catalog and get a visual description of all the different threats and impacts people might see. Probably other programs have done that as well. This is just in the last year where we've been active, what kind of state lands we are on, private, federal, St. Johns River, our water management districts, showing could we find the site, could it not be found? That means it needs to be a new site form done, and our breakout of archaeological versus cemetery. And I would wager most of those are done by Chris Nolan, so thank you, Chris. Some other things we learned along the way, steal this idea if you don't do it already. We want to make sure no one takes any artifacts. They sign an ethics statement. That's really important. How do we do that? Well, it's trained in very early to use these cards that have the scale and the location. And that way we don't get pictures of artifacts in the hands, which are really cool, but means it's already been picked up. So we say, please leave it in place, take the picture, leave the artifact. And these are just preliminary numbers from the first year, but just looking at what site kind of threats are laid out and who is monitoring the sites. We do an annual conference. And first it was in St. Augustine, and the next year was done in partnership with the Seminole tribe. We did not do it this year due to COVID, but we will be returning next year. We do have a 3D scanner that we have been using. We did have an underwater component that has been put on hold, but hoping we can get back to some more submerged workshops. We noticed scouts like to monitor together, so we have these social monitoring Mondays and a blitz that was done in partnership with the public lands last year, just to go out and monitor as many sites as they can. I'm running out of time. We do have conversations with the community that have taken place in different areas, so it's not just the models of sites threatened, but what sites do people want to work on. We do some emergency training for evacuating collections, and found we were not just making up scenarios, but they are based in reality. Our current database is in Arches. We're trying to use a collector app. Steal this idea if you don't use it already. Locator app that automatically labels and puts location on your photos, which is a great way to handle that. And then we're looking for how to support our partners of the 95 corridor that are interested, so that next year when we come back and have a great Site Stewardship Conference, we can have more Southeast programs. So I'll put in the chat link right now. Join us on Facebook for our NVARC group. We like to share topics. I'll put in the link to HMS Florida. We do have virtual workshops for both programs this month and next month. And I am the chair of the Society of Historical Archaeology's Heritage at Risk Committee. So if you're a professional, please join us. We get to put together fun exhibits. We do have an article I can send you on HMS, and one that just came out, public access in PNAS. So you can, oh, that's my son. Come on, that's cute. For impacts of sea level rise, how we interpret that, and how we make sure the community sees their place in what's happening. So thank you very much. And I will be around for the panel if people have questions, and I'm gonna hit stop share and load up the links. Thank you.
Thank you.